Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a former Boeing 737 pilot, and in this video I am going to talk a little bit about how we choose the cruising level to which we actually climb. Now, it's not as easy as we simply say like, oh, the flight plan wants us at flight level so-and-so, so we'll just go there. No, it is absolutely not that easy. But how is it actually then? Well, let's talk about it in today's video. So, the first thing we do consider is always the FMC Optimum level and the flight plan filed level. So let's have a look at that. Looking into the flight plan, we have to go to the cruise page, and then we have an Optimum flight level up here. Now, in my former airline, it was a standard operating procedure that we would normally not climb above the Optimum flight level. Now, the primary reason for that is that in the PMDG 737 we have a wider spread between optimum and maximum level than we had in my airline. Now, the reasons for that are long. In short, it comes down to the cruise CG over here. So, in my airline with an optimum of 368, like here, we'd have had something like flight level 375 maximum indicated, and so we generally wouldn't climb above the optimum level because the margin on the speed indicator would simply become too tight. Now, other operators of the 737 did do this stuff differently, so in other operators where you have the actual cruise CG in, like we have right here in the PMDG 737, we would generally see the greater spread between optimum and maximum. But still, in the 737, when you climb above the optimum level, you have a really tight speed margin, and we are going to see that at a point a little bit later in this video. So that is the first thing that you want to consider. The second thing, obviously, is the flight plan. Now, you will be asking, so why don't we generally simply climb up to the flight plan flight level? Now, it is true that this is the default options that most airlines will ask you to do. However, the flight plan is often made for certain circumstances. For example, if we have a look into this, the flight plan initially wants us at flight level 230 with a stepped climb to flight level 350 at the waypoint Ropoff. And as you can see, Ropoff is basically what we're inbound right now, and we have been climbing all time long, so you can see that we can easily reach level 350 by Ropoff. So basically 350 is our first filed cruising level. Now, that first filed cruising level is obviously based on the zero fuel weight that you had in the flight plan, which in this case is 62.1 tons. However, if we have a look into the init reference page, we are going to notice that we only have 57.9 tons, which is roughly 2.5 tons less than the planned weight. Obviously, this raises our optimum flight level, and therefore the airplane is technically able to climb higher than the flight level filed in our flight plan. Now, there is also a very good indication in the plan down here, which is the operational impact section. And this basically shows us that if we climbed 2,000 feet above our level, this one says not available. Obviously, it is something different in our case in the flight over here, because we have a lighter gross weight, so we are actually able to climb higher. And the other thing we can see is that if we flew 2,000 feet below, we would actually save 73 kilograms of fuel and the time would be unchanged. So in this case, flying 2,000 feet below our planned level might actually save us a little bit of fuel. However, keep in mind that all this planning is still based on the gross weight that your flight plan is calculated on. So in real life, you will typically be at a lighter zero fuel weight than what your flight plan is filed for, and therefore you basically on every flight should reconsider your cruising level before you actually climb to it. Now, if you were flying anywhere in Europe, air traffic control would very likely ask you to confirm your requested flight level for the cruise. The reason for that is spread over several different points, ranging between air traffic control simply not having access to the flight level that you filed in your cruise, which is the case in some places over Germany, as some air traffic controllers have told me, so they just can't see it in their system due to system limitations. But air traffic control realizes as well that climbing to a higher level is often possible and often going to be more economic, which is the primary reason why they ask pilots which level they want to climb to. Now, let's have a look at the things we need to consider when deciding on the level that we wish to climb towards. Now, obviously, the first one is going to be what is the filed flight level and if that might be for a certain reason. We are doing a rather long flight at 3 hours trip time right now, and therefore the filed flight level cannot be due to restrictions on our route of flight, at least not in terms of maximum altitude restricted due to the length of the flight. So that might very well be the case on short sectors in the region of about an hour or less, where the airline might just file you at flight level 300, even though the airplane would technically be able to reach flight level 370, for example. Now, in our case, we are not limited by the length of flight, so that limit is out. The next point then is what we looked into in the operational impacts down here. We can see that according to the flight plan we cannot go higher, and this actually makes sense when you take into account that we have an optimum level of 368 right now, but we are 2.5 tons lighter than our planned gross weight. So if we actually departed at the planned 0 fuel weight, our optimum would be much lower and we couldn't climb above that. However, in this particular situation we will probably be able. Now let's go ahead and look at the next point, which is the winds that we are expecting. So often if you look at your flight plan, and if we look for example at the next waypoints here, let's say we take Rhodos, then we will see that our forecast wind for the flight at flight level 350 would be a northerly wind at 28 knots, at flight level 330 it's also northerly but 29 knots, and at 370 it's also northerly but at 25 knots. So we can see that with increasing altitudes our wind is actually decreasing in strength. Now, if we look at our general direction of flight, we are eastbound today, and therefore, since the wind is coming basically from 90 degrees offset, that reduction in the wind speed is not going to have any implication on our flight, which basically means that we are unaffected of this. And therefore we can ignore the wind effects. However, if we were flying at a slightly more southerly course, where we could profit from the additional tailwind that we would have at a lower flight level, this would be something that we would take into consideration for our flight. Now, since the wind is basically ruled out for this one, the last thing that we have to ask ourselves is, can we take flight level 370, which is closest to the optimum, or should we stay in flight level 350? Now, personally, I basically always went down the following road. And I basically said that if the optimum is within 200 feet of the next higher suitable flight level, in this case that is exactly the case, so we have 368 as an optimum here, and 370 would be the next available flight level in our direction of flight. For that reason, I would go ahead and choose flight level 370 for our cruise on this particular flight. So let's go ahead and do that. We can either type 370 in manually, like this, but I'm going to erase that for a second. Or we can go the easy way, and when air traffic control asks us which flight level we prefer, we are going to state flight level 370. They will assign it, we dial it in, and then we can update the FMC cruising altitude by pressing the altitude intervent button that we can find on the right side of the altitude selector. Alt intervent, and now the FMC is updated automatically for flight level 370. Do note that it is a real life thing in the 737 that it goes out of the econ speed when you do that. So you have to press the econ button again and execute that, and only then your airplane is going to accelerate to the best or to the most optimal speed for that new flight level. Something for you to take into consideration when you're deciding if you want to climb to slightly above the optimum level or if you want to stay below the optimum is obviously turbulence. So in a situation like what we have in the flight right now, we would have asked air traffic control if there was any further limitation, or rather we would have asked them if they had any turbulence reports at flight level 370 from any other aircraft along our route. If ATC reported that the cruising level or that level 370 did not have any turbulence reports or is reported smooth, we would have climbed. If there were any signs of turbulence, like light or moderate turbulence, we would have maintained flight level 350 until the Optimum was actually at flight level 370 and then have continued our climb to that new flight level. One good indication of the turbulence that you can expect actually comes right from your flight plan, and we can find that on the top of the nav log up here, which is the maximum shear value. Now, the maximum shear value basically is a value which outlines if you have stronger or less strong wind 2,000 feet above and below the flight level that is planned, and the greater the difference between the winds at the different flight levels, the more likely the chance for turbulence. And that is what the shear value that you can see marked in the flight plan there represents. Basically, up to 3 you can expect that it is going to be mostly smooth, and from 3 onwards things are going to get more and more turbulent. However, the shear factor is not necessarily a good indication if there is actually going to be turbulence or not. Indeed, more often than not, I've seen stronger turbulence reported at more often than not, I've seen stronger shear factors than 3 and the air was absolutely smooth, while in other occasions the shear factor was 0, 1 or 2 and we actually encountered some moderate turbulence along the flight. So it is a good indication, however it is not a perfect indication. So, I want to close this video by showing you really quick why we would not normally climb above the optimum flight level. And we can see that right here on the primary flight display. We are now reaching flight level 370, which is now 100 feet above the optimum, which has just increased. So keep in mind, the optimum flight level in the Boeing 737 FMC is a representation of the current gross weight of the aircraft. If you look at the optimum when you are at a lower flight level, let's say flight level 100 or flight level 150, then you can expect the optimum to increase by roughly 200 feet when you're climbing to a level like 370. So the optimum is based on the current weight. As you climb up, you burn fuel, you get lighter, therefore the optimum is slightly going to increase, like we have just seen with the increase from level 368 to level 369. However, even in 369, where we are just 100 feet above our optimum flight level, you can see how little the margin on the speed indicator over here is. We only have like 7 knots to the upper amber band and maybe 15 to the lower amber band. In other words, if we were now to encounter some turbulence, then we would basically have to request a descent to a lower flight level fairly quickly, because the airplane might just go into an over or an underspeed too quickly. So do take that into account when you are planning your flights. Now that's going to be it for this video. I hope you found this one interesting, and I am looking forward to read your comments on if you considered this already in your flights, or if by now you always simply climbed to the flight level that was filed in your flight plan. In any case, thank you very much for watching. I'm looking forward to see your comments, and if you like what I'm doing on the channel over here, then do leave a comment, like and subscribe, as it does really help out the channel. Finally, if you really love what I'm doing, I would appreciate to see you as a channel member, which is going to give you exclusive early access to new videos before they are released for anyone else. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm looking forward to see you all again, hopefully very soon.